Hi, my name is Dave Bazanko, and welcome to my virtual keynote, Project Resilience, where today I'm going to be talking about scaling human resilience across organizations. Now, when I think about resilience, quite often I think about resilience being almost like a business project plan. And it reminds me of a story about 5 years ago when I was actually running the project management office for a large multi-million dollar bespoke learning project. And I recall working with one of my project managers, and his entire job was to manage the project plan, the Gantt chart, that big nasty thing that every project planner loves to hate. And I remember we were coming out of the client's office. We were in a project planning review meeting where we were supposed to be getting the project plan signed off on. And in that meeting, the key stakeholder had introduced yet another out of scope item. And I remember walking away without the project plan being signed off. We were leaving the building, and it looked like my project manager literally was having a nervous breakdown. I knew he hadn't been eating well. I knew he hadn't been sleeping. And he just looked at me and he said, Dave, how can you stay so calm when the proverbial you know what is hitting the fan every single day and this plan still isn't signed off? And I just looked at him and I said, I'm going to share something with you. 15 years ago, when I was 40 years old, I had my aha moment. I had my black swan event in business. I know what that looks and feels like, and I'm never going back there again. And I can tell you one thing with great certainty: the sun is going to come up again tomorrow with or without me. And it's my choice whether I want to invest in myself and my own health and well-being if I want to be there to see it come up again. Now, let me tell you a little bit about who I am and why I'm going to be talking to you today. So I have a 30-year business career. For the first 25 years of my business career, I owned an import marketing company working with some of North America's leading brands. Now, I am a Canadian and I am a very proud hockey dad. And I took advantage of an opportunity to establish a brand in Canada called Hockey Mom and Hockey Dad. And we sold that apparel line through big box retailers across Canada. And we were actually so popular, I was in the newspaper. I was being interviewed on TV with Wayne Gretzky's father, Walter Gretzky, and doing cross promotions with him. I was actually interviewed on Hockey Night in Canada. So if you're down in the States watching this today, imagine Monday Night Football calling you up and saying, we want to interview you on national TV and talk about your clothing brand. I mean, it was a bit of a big deal. But all that good stuff was happening in the background, while in the foreground, there was something else that was playing out that was quite detrimental to me. And that is, I got stuck in about 2007 with about $500,000 of inventory and a really, really bad situation. I had inherited a new buyer at one of my big box accounts. It wasn't Walmart. And that new buyer saw the recession coming up on the horizon, something that I hadn't seen. And he decided that he didn't want to have any private label brands in his stores. So rather than just tell me that, he allowed me to go out and build my inventory. And I got to learn the hard way the difference between a sales forecast and a purchase order. See, a purchase order is guaranteed. A sales forecast is just that. It's a forecast, not guaranteed. But if you miss your deadlines, you might lose all your profits. So it kind of operates from a vendor's point of view the exact same way. So I went out and built all this inventory, and it never left the warehouse. And when I would call up the buyer and say, where are the orders? He would just say, oh, just relax, they're coming. Well, they never came because he did something internally that I won't speak of today, but he sabotaged my business from the inside. Now, I was made whole after this disclosure was found out by the company in question, by one of the vice presidents who got wind of what had happened. But by that point, it was too late. I had already gotten to the point where I was about 15 days away from both commercial and personal bankruptcy. That financial crisis led to a physical crisis. I remember being in the ER thinking that I was having a heart attack, and having the ER doctor come up to me and say, Dave, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is you didn't have a heart attack today, but the bad news is you came awfully close. And I've got two choices for you. You can either go on heart and cholesterol medication for the rest of your life, or you can choose to lose the weight, get in shape, and deal with all that stress. Now, what would you do? I mean, just if you sat down with your doctor and you got that kind of advice, what would you do? How many people would take the pills and how many people would try to get in shape? Well, I can tell you, when you leave the hospital to get in shape, there's no one there to help you. And most fitness trainers don't really understand what you need. So I was left to my own devices to figure out how I was going to turn this all around for myself. Well, I did about what anybody would do at this point, which was absolutely nothing, because I had heard that I didn't have a heart attack that day. So I stuck my head in the sand and pretended that nothing had happened. But about 2 months later, the symptoms started coming back again because I hadn't changed my ways. And I remember I thought to myself, I've got to do something good today. I've got to go out and start investing in my heart today. So I went out for a walk and I decided that every day I was going to feel good about myself. I was going to feel like a winner because I had invested in my heart every day. Well, that walk turned into a run that turned into a longer run. And then about 3 years later, I'd sort of become Forrest Gump. I hadn't taken a day off running for 3 years. And one day I quite literally bumped into an Ironman triathlete while I was out for a run. He was at the top of a hill waiting for his wife to catch up to him. And he had this ratty old Ironman t-shirt on. And being a talkative guy, I just said, "Hey, have you really done that Ironman thing?" And he spent 5 minutes with me that absolutely changed my life. He said, "Dave, I used to be just like you. I used to just run. And then I realized if I ever got hurt running, I'd need something to fall back on to keep a good thing going." He said, "Triathlon offers two non-impact sports in biking and swimming. So if I ever got hurt running, I'd have those two sports to fall back on and keep a good thing going." And I thought to myself, well, that makes sense, but good for you. I'm never going to be a triathlete, but good for you. Well, fast forward about 4 more months. It's November in Canada, and we had this wet, snowy day. It was sleeting outside. It doesn't even sound like fun, sleet. But it was sleeting, and I was deciding to run on my treadmill that day. And I had the TV on, and I was flipping through the channels, and didn't the Ironman come on TV? And I saw this guy running on the screen, and I'm thinking, he's running, I'm running, I can do that. I've ridden a bike before. I've never drowned swimming. How hard can this thing really be? So I decided to go off and sign up for my first Ironman triathlon. It was called Ironman Muskoka 70.3. I had no idea what that was. I had no idea how long it was. I thought all Ironmans were the same. So I signed up for this event. And I remember it cost me, I think, $500 to sign up for the actual race. And then I had to spend another $1,500 at the luxury host hotel that was hosting the event. And then I realized I needed to buy a bike, and these things cost about $2,000. And then I decided to call my wife into my office. And I said, I called her down, and she came into the office, and I looked at her and I said, turned my computer around and says, "Look what I just did." Now, I was terrified at that moment. She's looking at the screen, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I'm more scared of the fact that I just signed up for an Ironman, or the fact that I just spent about $2,000 and have to spend another $2,000 more without even talking to my wife about it first. But she just looked at me and said, "Dave, I've watched you morph into something really special over the last 3 years, and I believe in you. And if this is what you want to do, I'm with you." Now, I got to tell you how empowering it is to know and surround yourself with people who believe in you before you even believe in yourself. That is such a huge lesson to learn in life, that you need to surround yourself with people who believe in you, perhaps even more than you do believe in yourself. Well, I did go on to become an Ironman. I finished that race. I ended up over the next sort of 12 years, finishing 12 half Ironmans, 3 full Ironmans. And by the way, that 70.3 was half the distance of what a full Ironman is. And over that time, I was asked to go out and do speaking engagements, coach high school students. And it's just been a real journey. And today, what you're going to learn in this keynote is you're going to get perspective from both a business point of view and from a endurance athlete's point of view, because I think the two of those things have really meshed well together. And it helps to make a lot of good sense, and it makes the stories a little bit more fun to listen to, rather than perhaps what you think you might be hearing today. Now, I've realized that when I talk to organizations, there's a vast difference in how people think about resilience. It seems like no two people have the same definition. As a matter of fact, if you go online and look at 10 different online dictionaries, you won't find resilience described the same way in any two of them, which I find really perplexing. And you'll hear a lot of bouncing back like a rubber band. But in my mind, resilience is more than just bouncing back. That's just surviving. In my mind, resilience is not only surviving, but learning from the experience so that you can thrive. That's what resilience is to me. But I also found this YouTube video of a seminar, a fireside chat, at the World Science Festival, where the moderator asks 4 leading industry experts how they define resilience. And it's kind of funny. We've got 2 psychologists, a scientist, and a monk. And when he asks the question, the first psychologist on the left goes into this tirade for about 10 minutes about how resilience is about outcomes and circumstances. And he really just can't find, I'm sitting there going, just say thrive, just say thrive. He doesn't come up with any words. It's just this philosophical, wishy-washy description. And the psychologist sitting right beside him, the girl in the blouse, she's got her legs crossed, her arms are folded, and she's like, I'm having none of this. None of this. This is wrong. And the first chance she gets to jump in, she interjects and says, nope, I don't agree. Now, the scientist that's sitting beside her, he's thinking, well, we've done a lot of advancement in neuroscience lately, and we know a lot of the chemicals that are present in the brain when people are feeling resilient. And I think we're not too far off from a time when we'll be able to put those chemicals into an aerosol spray, spray it into a room, and breathe it into your nose, and all of a sudden you'll just feel more resilient. And then you've got a monk who, in the monastery, they believe that meditation and mindfulness and being happy is the key to resilience. And what I think is just interesting that everybody comes to the table with their own unique perspective. And what we have to do as organizations, if we want to develop a resilient organization, at least the group in this room, in this organization that's watching this video right now, or this recording, we've got to come to a definition, a clear definition of what we think resilience is so that we can all get to the same place together. So the first step in developing organization and scaling organizational resilience is coming up with a definition that we can all believe in. So to my mind, resilience is not just surviving adversity, it's learning from it so that you can avoid making the same mistakes again and you can actually thrive. So if you can come up with a definition that as a group, as an exercise that allows you to sort of get to the same common ground, that's going to help you as you move forward, as you try to scale out resilience across your organization. Now, let me give you a better example of what I feel resilience is. This is a picture from back in 2006. I like to take my kids camping every year, and we go to a place just north of Toronto, about 3 hours north, called Algonquin Park. And one of the kids' favorite activities to this day is still cliff jumping, jumping off the rocks into a dark lake. Now, you can imagine if you've ever done rock jumping before, or cliff jumping before, you know that as you pull up to a rock face, in your boat or a canoe, the water's awfully dark looking. And it's deep, you think, and you hope there's no rocks just below the surface. And you sort of size up the hill, the boulders, and you kind of go, that looked kind of cool. I think I'd like to jump off that. And as you start scurrying up the side of the cliff or the rock, your feet are slipping on all the moss. And the closer you get to the top and you start looking over the edge, you start thinking to yourself, that maybe wasn't the smartest decision to do this because this is a little bit intimidating. And then you start to get those butterflies in your stomach. Now, with kids, this particular rock was probably maybe only 10 feet off the water. And, the older boys had no problem jumping. They're fearless. But some of the girls, even the fearless girls, my daughter, for example, she would stand at the edge and she would look and then step back and then look and then step back. And this might play out for, a good hour. Until she finally decided to take that leap of faith. And the thing was, when she took that leap of faith, it took so long. She built up so much fear in her head that wasn't real. And when she finally took that leap of faith, she was so exhilarated with all that dopamine and the chemicals racing through her brain saying that was fun, that she quickly scurried back up the side of the boulder again and wanted to go a second time, then a third time, then the fourth time. And all of a sudden that fear was gone, right? That anxiety was gone. She had looked at adversity as being this monumental thing in her mind. And then she overcame it. And then she overcame it with ease to the point that she was just jumping into the water feet first. And she was going time after time after time. So this past November, we were up in Muskoka and we were staying at a resort, and the resort was selling these mugs. And on the cover of, or on the front of the mug, you can see there's a young man diving sort of headfirst into the water. And this, when I saw this mug, this symbolized resilience to me, because this symbolized the moment that you stop jumping in feet first. You have developed so much confidence and competence over adversity that you're willing to dive in head first every time. And that's why I use my little orange diving mug here to remind me of how resilient feels and how resilient I can be. So the next time you ask yourself, what is resilience? Resilience is that feeling you get that you've got so much confidence and competence because you've experienced something that the next time you do that exercise, or the next time you face that adversity, you're going to dive in head first and you're going to thrive. So that's kind of how I think about resilience in a bit of a nutshell, how I define it. Hopefully that makes some sense to you. Now, I'm going to talk about an event that, depending on when you're watching this, this just happened a couple of weeks ago in the 2022 Masters. And we all got to watch Tiger Woods do something, and that's called thriving by redefining happiness. And when I think about Tiger in the first 6 green jackets he won, he was a very competitive guy, and he would get very upset when things didn't go right. And as most professional athletes at the very top of their game do, he was so super competitive. But just a year ago, Tiger Woods found himself in a car accident in a hospital bed during the Masters in 2021, where he wasn't sure if he was ever going to be able to walk again. They weren't sure if they were going to be able to save his leg, to the point where 12 months later, he is selectively playing in tournaments again. And not only is he playing in those tournaments, he's competing. He made the cut. He was walking around visibly limping and dealing with the adversity of physical stress. But what's really interesting to me was that he was so much more appreciative of where he was this past weekend, the fact that he was even there at all. And the new Tiger that I got to see, well, he did something really interesting, because I found as an athlete, I always used to say to myself, one day when I'm successful, I'll be happy. Or when I hit that sales goal, I'll be happy. Or when I cross my first Ironman finish line, then I'll be happy. I think a lot of us are searching for happiness. And I heard a definition during another person's keynote, and the definition went like this: happiness is the joy you feel while striving for your full potential every day. It should be that, because every time we say, I'll be successful when I reach a certain goal, well, what we do is we put that goal over the cognitive horizon. And if we say we will be happy when we hit the sales goal, as soon as we hit the sales goal, we're happy for about 5 minutes, and then the sales goal gets increased. For me, when I crossed my first Ironman finish line, I was happy for about 5 seconds. I turned around and looked at the time and went, 14 hours, I can do better than that. And immediately I set my time and my sights on my next race to be faster. So the point is, Tiger walked around that weekend smiling. And even on Saturday, after his worst round of the event, the commentator asked him, what went wrong out there today? And he looked at her and went, well, I think I made too many putts. And then he started laughing. So he wasn't trying to defend his actions. He was using humor and just acknowledging that, you know what, I'm here. I made the cut. There's about 60 professional golfers that aren't here on Saturday. They didn't make the cut. So I've already achieved that goal, and I'm out here to have fun now. And see all those people who are following me along the sidelines of the fairway? They're cheering, and they're just waiting to see me do one more miraculous thing. They just want to see one spectacular shot that they can tell their grandkids about for years to come. And there was one point in the tournament, I think it was on hole 17, where his ball was up against a bush and he couldn't stand in his regular stance. So he actually flipped his club head over, stood on the opposite side of where he would normally stand, and whacked the ball out onto the green with a backward shot. And he was smiling and laughing the whole time he did it, knowing that, if that's the only shot he made over the tournament, that's the only thing people would have ever remembered about Tiger that weekend. And that was okay, that he had made yet another phenomenal shot. So I just love the idea that Tiger has not only proven that you don't have to win the event to be resilient and to feel like a winner. You can feel like a winner every day just by going out and redefining happiness. And if you can do that, find happiness in the joy you feel while striving to reach your full potential every day, you are well on your road to becoming much more resilient. Now, let me talk about Elon Musk for a second, because I think Elon Musk said it best when about 18 years ago, he found himself as a young dot-com multimillionaire with $100 million to burn, quite literally in rockets. And he realized that he had a vision where he felt that the human race needed to be multiplanetary to continue to exist and thrive. So he found himself in a moment in time where he had $100 million to burn, and at a time when there were scientists who might otherwise be working at NASA out of a job, and astronauts who might otherwise be working at NASA out of a job, who wanted to join him on a new venture of trying to build space shuttle, commercial space shuttle, space travel that would be cost effective and as every bit as safe as what NASA was currently working on. So they went out, and it took about 18 years. They almost went bankrupt, burning through that $100 million and blowing up rockets, to the point where they started having successful missions. And they became the #1 vendor to NASA, winning a $1.5 billion contract to launch satellites and eventually bring astronauts up to the space station. And as he was talking about everything that happened as SpaceX had just docked, I think, their first two-man flight up to the space station, he said, you've got to realize that right now we're in a moment of time. It's a window of opportunity, and that window will not always be open. We're very fortunate that 18 years ago, I surrounded myself with the right people who shared the same vision that I shared, and that we had the opportunity of having the resources to go out and make mistakes, suffer through tremendous adversity, and choose to learn from it so that we can improve and get better. That's the only way we get better. Science advancement doesn't just happen. You know, you've got to have the adversity and the struggle to learn from it to improve. Again, that's the essence of resilience. Now, when I think about resilience, I like to think of resilience almost like a 1,000-piece puzzle. And every single puzzle piece represents a window of opportunity to help build your resilience. But again, the window won't always be open. Now, I go back to the analogy that I used of a project plan. If you think of this like a project plan, think about when you're writing out a project plan, you have to have your main objectives, your main events, and then all the line items that impact the deliverable, which is the completion of that main event or that main project. What I'm going to talk about over the next few slides is going to be how you can take sort of that project plan mentality and implement that across all the moving pieces, the puzzle pieces that make up the resilient person that you can potentially be. And it's going to highlight and help identify all the windows of opportunity that you may or may not see. If you can do that, you are going to be well on your way to learning how to become more resilient and then scale that idea across your organization. But whenever we, try to put a puzzle together, we always start with the first 4 corner pieces, and then we build the outside edges and build the puzzle from that outside inward. And when I think about a project plan, again, I just mentioned, we have to identify sort of the main outcomes. The main outcome of a puzzle is we want to complete the puzzle. We have a vision of sort of what that puzzle is supposed to look like, and then we have to organize the pieces so that we can sort of complete this thing in a logical manner. Well, the same thing goes with resilience. I believe that the 4 corners of that puzzle of resilience are very individual, they're personal, but I believe that there's 4 things, sort of 4 areas that cause us stress in our lives. And if we can identify those 4 things and then start building our puzzle inward, all those line items start to make sense and they start to become obvious. But I start with my 4 corners, and they are typically physical resilience, mental resilience, personal resilience, and then financial resilience. Let's talk about physical resilience and why it comes first. Well, when I sat down with my cardiologist, he said something very clear to me. He said, Dave, if your heart stops beating, you are dead and you are of no use to anyone. So regardless of how much money you have, if your heart stops beating, it's over. So invest in your heart first. It's the old air mask theory. Put your own air mask on first, then help the person beside you. Today, what we're going to be talking about is, let's start with our physical resilience. That's the first corner piece. Then we're going to talk about mental resilience. That is what you believe personally and how you identify as a human being, how you identify yourself. A good example of that is, let's say you're trying to quit smoking and somebody comes up to you and says, hey, do you want to go out and have a smoke? If you said, no, that's okay, I'm trying to quit, well, you still identify as a smoker who's trying to quit smoking. But if you say, no, I don't smoke, that's identifying as a non-smoker. And that mindset is what's going to help you, what you identify with is going to help you become more mentally resilient. Then I talk about personal resilience, and this is whether you have a growth or a fixed mindset. And, it's kind of a sliding scale. You've got to catch yourself and just sort of be aware that at times you can slip into a fixed mindset real easily. When I was stuck in business, stuck financially, I had a very fixed mindset. I wasn't allowing myself to learn and grow. I was in triage mode, and that wasn't helpful to anybody. So personal resilience is really about how you not only educate yourself formally, but how you choose to upskill and learn on the job to be more relevant and useful to not only yourself, but the organizations that you serve. And then the final corner is financial resiliency, and that's like comfort and security. But let's face it, we all want to feel financially secure as we grow through life. And the less you know about money, the more insecure you're going to feel, the more anxiety you're going to have. So these are what I believe are the four sort of cornerstones. Let's call these our four main outcomes of our project plan. And now we're going to start looking at all the different line items that might impact the outcome of that project. So what I normally do when I work with an organization is we do a series of 6 workshops. And we can't go through all of this, obviously, in a keynote, but this is from a workshop I did recently where we talked about all 4 corners, and the group was actually coming up with all of the different items, the line items that would fill in this chart. And I just want to talk about this first corner, physical. They happen to land on sleeping as the first broad category that might impact their physical resilience. And then they started listing off sort of all of the different items, the line items that might impact how they get quality of sleep. And we went on and did this for all 4 corners and ended up with a massive sort of list of things that could impact your health, well-being, and personal resilience. Once we got that list together, that's like, now we're starting to develop our project plan. And then, from my background in governance with projects, it was my responsibility to put a heat map or a traffic light system to all the items on the project plan that might be at risk. So when you think about developing a resilience project plan for your own life, it might sound a bit daunting, like putting a project plan together, but once you've listed all those items, all you've done is you've sort of created windows of opportunity to see all the little things that you may not regularly think about and how they might impact that end outcome. And when you apply what I call a traffic light system, if you've never done any project planning before, this is really simple. If you feel sort of, well, let's redefine this. Let's say you're driving your car through town and you hit nothing but green lights. You feel like you've won the lottery. It's like the best day ever. And then all of a sudden you hit 2 red lights in a row and it feels like the world is just crashing down all around you. How could this day get any worse? Is that red light ever going to turn green again? This is taking forever. These are the sort of things that play out in our brains. And it's only natural, but we have this social contract with streetlights. We know that eventually that red light will turn green again. The same thing happens when you start putting all your line items together on your resilience project plan and you apply this traffic light system. And what you are allowing yourself to do is, even though you might have one red light, something that's really holding you back and making you feel stuck in life. And that's the way that we feel when we get a red light, that we're absolutely stuck. And those yellow lights, those are like decisions. Those are opportunities to maybe leap forward, or if I make the wrong decision, get stuck and fall behind again. But quite often, like I say, in life, we look at things, adversity, and adversity is just one red light. But if all we do is focus on that one red light, we tend to forget all the other good stuff going on. If nothing else, what a heat map or what a traffic light system might do for you is just point out that you got a lot of good stuff going on in your life. And there's a lot of red lights that can easily be turned green. And I think if you look at item 22 there on the screen, it says pillow. And I think back to when I used to have a really crappy pillow, and I slept on that crappy pillow for years, and it affected and impacted my quality of sleep. It gave me a sore neck, and I hated it. But for some reason, I was too cheap to go and spend $40 and buy a new one. So one day I said on my project plan, buy a new pillow. And I put a date down. I was going to go that Saturday, and that's the day I was going to get my new pillow. And I went out and got it, and I turned that red light to green. Like, it was simple. It wasn't a monumental task. It wasn't going out and running a marathon. The idea is that as human beings, we need to train our brains the same way an athlete would train their body to build on the good stuff, recognize the good stuff so that the bad stuff doesn't seem so overwhelming. And you can start to actually see how many good things are happening. And you can start to be grateful for a lot of the things that are happening in your life. But I think if you've got any project planning experience, you might look at this and call this more of a RAID chart, right? You can look at all the things that might be at risk. So for example, maybe one of your green lights, you're not paying as much attention to it, and that might be at risk of maybe slipping into a yellow, maybe slipping into a red, because we know the lights could always be changing. So even just having it on your list and keeping it top of mind helps you identify the risks. It helps you make assumptions about how you might be able to improve a situation. It identifies really obvious issues. Let's say you're having a financial crisis or a job crisis or a relationship crisis. Makes it obvious so that you go, okay, this is something I have to address, but it's not the only issue going on in my life. I got a lot of good stuff here. And it's knowing that you've got a lot of good stuff that keeps you feeling very resilient. And the most interesting thing is dependencies. What pieces are dependent on the others? Because sometimes you'll find the same item pops up on 2 or 3 different lists. And if you think of a puzzle, if you take any one of these puzzle pieces behind me, each puzzle piece is dependent on 4 or 5 pieces all around it to work. So being able to identify how this chart works and how this resilience project plan works, how simple it is to put together, but once you've put it together, now it gets a little more easy to see. And when you can see it and apply the traffic lights to it, it just makes it a lot more likely that you will learn from certain experiences and start moving forward. Now, what happens when you've got a yellow light or a red light? Then we have to do something that I call my VIP process of resilience. VIP stands for vision, identity, and proof. And every single one of those line items, if it ever starts to turn yellow or red, all you have to do is apply this very simple process, VIP, to any one of those puzzle pieces or those line items to help it turn from red to green. And here's how that works. First, vision. Let's talk about why employees become disengaged at work or why they leave certain organizations. The number one reason why that happens is because visions get unaligned or disaligned, where the employee's vision is to go left and the employer's vision is to go right. And all of a sudden, we're headed in the totally opposite direction and employees are looking for work elsewhere. So how do you rectify that? Well, I believe that a company, in order for a company to thrive, it has to have a very crystal clear vision that everybody can see in their mind's eye, right? We've all heard, I have a dream speech. That's, we visualize kids of all races playing together in a playground. That's the dream, that we all live in harmony. We all learn how to get along together. There's an organization out there, I won't name the name, who has done a lot of amazing things with their company to the point where they're offering university educations to any one of their associates who wishes to get one free of charge. It's one of the employee benefits of lifelong learning. Now, if I'm a manager and I've got a crew of people who report to me in one of my stores, and I know that they're going to look for work elsewhere because they seem to be not really enjoying what they're doing. They seem to have a little bit more potential. If I went to them and said, hey, the vision of the company is that we're going to be opening 10 more stores in this local area, And I think you might make a really good leader. But in order for that to happen, you're going to have to take some additional training. What is your vision of the future? And they say, well, you know what? I've always wanted to sort of work in digital technology, but I've because of so many different circumstances, I wasn't able to go to college. Now, okay, what have you just done? You've just said the company's vision is to train their employees for future of work. And your vision as an employee is to be trained so that you can take advantage of the future job opportunities. Now it would behoove you as a manager to align those two visions and say, hey, look, okay, I identify you as somebody who probably would excel in this program. Let's work together so that as the company thrives and moves forward, you're going to be able to get the schooling, the education you need to thrive and move forward, but you're also going to get the context and the experience on the job training to help you as you get that education, to make it easier. And maybe we can work with your shifts if, during exam time, it gets a little hard. When everybody gets on the same page, what happens is employees become engaged because they feel like they've got nothing but green lights. They feel like even though that one little red light, that exam, or maybe, there's a work conflict or a family conflict, it might seem hard, but it's not so overwhelming that they can't see it through to the end. And I'm telling you, when you get everybody aligned and you align those visions, it is so powerful. And then what happens? Rather than have an employee who becomes disgruntled and looks for work elsewhere, you retain that employee and they go for that higher paying, higher quality job. And it makes your organization that much easier to thrive in the future because you're working with the team you already have, upskilling them versus trying to go out and find new employees all the time, right? That's a huge problem that businesses have and will continue to have. And this is just an example of one company who seems to have found a way to do that right. So, as one example, but happy to if you reach out to me on direct message through LinkedIn, I'm happy to give you more examples of how that might work with your organization. So first step is aligning visions. Second is identity. So we talked about vision. What's the identity you're going to assume every day? When I decided to become a triathlete, I had to assume the identity of an athlete every day. That means investing in that process every single day. I've got a 12-month plan that I follow every year. And what I do week to week is exactly the same. The only thing that changes is the volume. That makes it very easy to duplicate and easy to share with other people. But that's the identity I assume as a triathlete. What about when you are looking at a yellow light on your chart that you need to change, or a red light that you need to change? Okay, well, agile change is something that we talk a lot about in business, but is very rarely ever utilized. So here's a really simple way of looking at agile change. There's something called the scientific method. The scientific method is simply identifying a problem, then creating a hypothesis. That's my vision. If I do this behavior, then I expect that outcome, right? That's my vision. Test hypothesis. That's your identity. What is the process or the identity you're going to assume every day that you're going to be testing the results on? And then you reflect. What's the proof say? Did the identity or the process work, or do I need to refine it and make some changes? Obviously, next thing is refine and then repeat the process. Always look for sort of constant improvement. This is the scientific method. This isn't something that I've come up with, but isn't it interesting how the VIP process neatly fits into agile change? So if you're thinking about any one of those yellow or red lights, just ask yourself this: if I made this specific change to my behavior, then would this outcome be the reality? And then go out and make that change and then track it. See if it works. If it doesn't work, make an adjustment. If it does work, refine it, try to make it better. See what else you can learn. Because here's the thing, science is changing all the time and it's developing all the time and we're learning all the time. So don't get so fixed on something that you think is working great, because in my experience, and I'll share a great story. When I used to train as an Ironman, I used to train to try to get to the World Championships in Hawaii. And the way you do that is by getting faster, by pushing your threshold of your endurance ability, by training harder. What that did was it took my heart rate out of the area that is beneficial to my long-term health and well-being. You see, think of health and well-being sort of like a U-shaped curve. And on one end of the U-shaped curve are couch potatoes who do nothing. And they're at very high risk of cardiovascular heart disease. And on the other shape of that U-shaped curve are endurance athletes who do way too much exercise and are at risk of, you guessed it, heart disease. So there's a nice sweet spot in the middle. And when you're in that sweet spot and you're training effectively, you get what they call BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factors. That's something that I'm sure that most of you have never heard of before, but became really interesting for me because I have a serious history of Alzheimer's and dementia in my family. And just before we put my father into a nursing home, I remember the neurologist saying to me, do you have any questions? And I said, yeah. How do I not end up like that? And they said to me, well, exercise, or they said, crosswords are for entertainment, exercise is brain food. BDNF, sorry, BDNF. Look it up. And I did look it up. And it turns out that brain-derived neurotrophic factors is like miracle grow for the brain. It helps create conditions where your hippocampus can start creating new brain cells, the very area that dementia and Alzheimer's impacts. So what we do know is that through science, less than 1% of all Alzheimer's and dementia cases are impacted by familiar genetics, which means you're going to get it no matter what. There's nothing you can do about it. The other 99% is enhanced because of lifestyle choices. So me training as an athlete, I know that when I was pushing my endurance to go faster and be a stronger athlete, all I was doing was serving my ego. I wasn't helping to get the outcome on my project plan that I wanted to have, which was to have a healthy heart and mind into my 80s and 90s and even at 100 years of age, something my dad never got to, right? He was an athlete his entire life. You didn't know that, but he trained the wrong ways and never got to take advantage of that BDNF. So I'm just trying to be more curious because to be resilient, right? I don't want to not be able to be there for my kids when they get married and have kids. That's not the outcome that I'm looking for. So I really have to start paying attention to all of my little line items and be curious and say, am I really getting the outcome? Do I have a yellow now on exercise where it used to be green? Why is that? What can I find out? What more can I learn? Refine the process and try to get back to, a great green light again. So agile change in a nutshell is just, remaining open-minded enough, having that growth mindset to be curious. And even though, you're trying to turn your reds to greens, always be cognizant that that green can turn yellow and then red if you don't pay attention or ask enough good questions. Now, let's talk about proof. So vision, identity, now we're talking about proof. Here's a little bit of science. It's the science of self-motivation. We know that in order for people to do things they don't want to do in life, we need to entice them with three tools of self-motivation. And they are social proof, instant gratification, and progress monitoring. So the way this works is this. Here is the line items again from the chart that we created. And that chart in and of itself is social proof to myself that I now am aware of all the different line items in my particular custom puzzle that is my resilience. I can see it. It's social proof that I can see it. I know it exists. If you think of this in a sales context at any organization, it might be a sales contest on the wall where we all can see where each other stands. That's called social proof. Sometimes the social proof needs to be out in public. Sometimes it needs to be private, but it's still social proof just the same. Where's the instant gratification? Well, how do you take a goal that's long-term, like feeling healthy and happy, and bringing it into the present day? Well, you do that with instant gratification. That might be a check mark saying you've just completed a task. It might be coloring or changing a red light to a green light or a yellow light to a green light. That simple act is monumental in your brain. It releases dopamine and it says you're getting closer to that place you aspire to be. So we need to have instant gratification that makes us feel good today about outcomes that are going to happen years down the road or months down the road. Then progress monitoring, where are we tracking how many days in a row we do the right thing? I have a journal that I share with all of my clients that they can start manipulating and massaging. And that journal is just a 365-day journal. And I use it as an athlete and I use it as a business person. It's modeled after some of the best practices out there. But the best practice is to train your brain the same way you train your body to keep looking for consecutive days, consecutive winning streaks that prove that you're moving forward. So these are the three sort of items that impact our self-motivation to do the things that we don't necessarily want to do. All right. Finally, let's talk about scaling human resilience. Now, this is an idea that comes from marketing. It is something called the law of diffusion of innovation. Quite simply put, across any population, you have a bell curve. There's about 3% roughly of the population who are innovators. These are the people who will sleep out overnight, waiting to buy the newest cell phone or the newest iPhone every time it comes out. They'll camp out in front of a store. And then you've got early adopters. These are the people who know that, hey, you know what? I want the new phone, but if I wait a week, I won't have to wait in line. There'll be lots in the store, and I'm willing to take that gamble and try this thing out. And then you've got the early majority and the late majority, which make up about 70% of the population. These people are very cynical. They don't trust you. And every time you come out with a new idea or corporate suggestion, they kind of go, yep, that's the flavor of the month. We'll play along until next month rolls around and we're doing something new. And then you got the laggards. These are the people who you really don't want to have at your company. You don't know how to get rid of them. They are very, very resistant to change. But how does any organization normally communicate new ideas with their troops, right? They usually take some sort of a mass shotgun approach and say, we're going to have a cultural change. We're going to put it out to everybody and everybody do this new thing. And it absolutely doesn't work. Why? Well, because the vast majority of the people in the organization do not trust you. And it's a tough pill to swallow, but it's the absolute truth. Who they do trust are their friends. And in and amongst every circle of friends, there's always going to be one or two early adapters who are willing to change. So these are the people that you need to focus on. These are what we would call our resilience champions in a workplace. These are people who would be willing to sit down and understand the process of, how do I put a resilience project plan together? How do I do that for myself? What's the duplicative process that I need to follow? Hey, that may have seemed hard in the beginning, but now it seems a lot easier. And now I'm part of this new social crowd who believe in each other. And all of a sudden, you know, the early majority are looking, going, what's up with Dave over there? Why is Dave so happy all the time? Why is Dave so upbeat all the time? What's going on? What's he doing? And then you find out, oh, he's in this new company project that I'm not invited into. What's that all about? And all of a sudden, you go to your manager. Well, why does Dave get to be in that project and I don't get to be in the project? That trust, that result, that early adapter, he creates demand for the entire organization to fall into place. The thing is, whether you're putting a puzzle together or you're trying to make organizational change, you don't know how long it's going to take. That's the bottom line, is all you can do is identify all those line items, put a plan together, recognize that each one of those line items is just a window of opportunity. And it's your opportunity to seize the day, seize the moment. And if you learn how to communicate with your troops properly, it becomes a lot easier to create organizational change. Now, what did we talk about today? And what can we really learn and take away from this? We learned that resilience, your ability to build resilience, isn't just going out and worrying about wellness. It's about having your physical resilience intact. It's about having your mental resilience intact. It's about having your personal resilience intact and your financial resilience intact. Then it's also very much like a big puzzle, and you're the only person who gets to clearly see in your mind's eye what that finished puzzle is supposed to look like. And the good news is it may change over time. You know, it may change from being your parent to being something very much more. And that's exactly what's happened for me. I no longer expect to live a life like my dad did. I expect to live a life vastly different because I invest in myself in a vastly different way. But then once you sort of determine and define what the outcome is that you want to have in life, and you all get sort of a North Star to move forward on, now you start surrounding yourself with a group of people who believe what you believe. And that becomes super, super powerful. And then together you can start identifying and organizing different line items, and you can start clubs at work, and you can talk about financial IQ, and you can talk about health and well-being, and you can talk about sugar of all things. There's just so many different conversations to be had that can help pique curiosity, not tell people what to do. Because we learned from the learning industry that adults don't learn by being told what to do, right? They learn by experiencing things for themselves. All we can really do is pique their curiosity and point them in a certain direction and see what they can come up with on their own. Hopefully they come up with the same thing that makes sense to everybody else. And if not, maybe they're onto something new. You never know. If you have a growth mindset, you've always got that open perspective. But once you've identified and organized all of those line items, right, understand that they are just a window of opportunity to be improved on. And eventually that window of opportunity will close. So it's on you. It would behoove you to start thinking about them as quickly as possible, at least understanding what's out there, understanding all those different line items that impact your ability to feel good about yourself every day. And then understanding how to mitigate risk with that VIP process. You know, I have yet to meet somebody who I haven't sat down with who had a real serious problem. Everything from the death of a child. And let's be clear. Before I get into that, and I don't know that I want to get into that conversation today. There are professionals out there. There's a great line that was shared with me as I became an Ironman triathlete from one of my training partners. We were talking about open water swimming. And they said, you know, a drowning man doesn't need a swim coach, right? They need a lifeguard. And as a resilience coach, I am that, a coach. I'm not a lifeguard. If you have somebody in your office who's in crisis, there's help out there for them. I've had to call that help for family members. I didn't even know that a lot of this help existed. And I've had this happen with my kids. I've had this happen with other family members, with friends. And when people are in crisis, you need to go to the lifeguards, the experts, so that they can mitigate the situation. And then when people are of a little more sound mind, let's call it, then we can start talking about building, and we can start using different techniques to help people feel more resilient. Remember, we want to feel like we're flying, not just jumping in feet first, but we want to feel like we're flying headfirst into adversity because we recognize it. We've got strategies to deal with it. We've got context, and now we can move forward very, very confidently, right? Confidence and competence builds resilience. And then the last thing is we learned about duplicative processes. We learned that resilience is nothing more than a duplicative process. Go out, create a project plan for your resilient life. You're the author of your own script. Write out your plan. Create a traffic light system, and then start learning. And how do I can move that green light or that red light to green light? Duplicative process. And then when a friend comes to you and says, hey, you've lost 50 pounds. You seem to be happier than you used to be. What are you going to say to them? Are you going to scare them away with your big stories? Or are you going to say, well, I've got this process. This process really worked for me, but it's different for everybody, but the fundamentals are still the same. Let me share it with you. This is how it works. Let me know if you have any questions. We get to the Ironman finish line the same way we get to the top of a mountain or the finish line of a marathon, one step at a time. You're going to change and make organizational change within an organization, one person at a time. And the more you sit down and understand this, that you can't do it in a shotgun approach, that it is a very personal thing. But if we're all on the same page and we're all working to get to that same North Star, it gets easier and easier and easier as time goes by. Now, I just want to sort of wrap up with a fun little story, because I think every great keynote should end up with a story. So this is a picture on the top left of my son, Warren, and I, who are currently training for Ironman Muskoka 70.3. I'd say about maybe 2 years ago, my son, Warren, and his friend, Aaron, who's in the red jacket there, these are two boys that I used to coach in high school rowing. And back in the day, say around 2011-ish, when I was coaching high school rowing and I was training as an Ironman triathlete and these boys were rowing, none of their parents were doing what I was doing. And all of their friends who rowed, we'd be down at the rowing course. I would hold court. They would bring their friends over to me so I could explain to them what an Ironman was and what I did. And these kids got it because a rowing course, an Olympic rowing course, is 2 kilometers long. They knew how hard that was. They knew how far 500 meters was, 1,000 meters, 1,500 meters, 2,000 meters. So they get it. And so I would sit there and say, well, an Ironman's kind of like this. Get in the starting gates and swim. Don't row your boat. swim to the finish, turn around, swim back to the start. Now they get that's a long way. That's 4 kilometers. Then I'd say, now get on your bike and ride to Toronto. Now, Toronto is 100 miles away or 100 kilometers away from where I live. And the kids get that too. They can see Toronto across the lake. They know how far it is visually. That's a long way. Ride to Toronto and back. And then get on your bike and ride to Hamilton, which is halfway to Toronto, right? Running to Hamilton. Like kids, even teenagers get how far that is. And they just couldn't fathom what I was doing and why I was doing it. And, I didn't realize, I just said, lead by example. That was how I was living my life as a leader. Lead by example. Take care of the person to the left and the right of you. Don't worry about going any farther than that. Well, here we are 12 years later. Warren and Aaron come up to me and they say, Dave, we want to do an Ironman. Do you want to do it with me? My answer is absolutely 100% yes, but I'm not going to coach you. I'll be your mentor, but you guys are going to have to do a lot of the work yourself. And I might guide you and show you, some processes that I've used, but you're going to have to get curious and figure this out on your own. I'm no longer your coach. I am your training partner. So the picture in the top left there is Warren and I running back in February of 2022. I think it was minus 35 degrees Celsius on a Saturday morning. We had started at 6 a.m. The sun had finally come up. This was a 2-hour run. You can see the ice all over my beard. There was an ice cube in my eyelash. Warren broke an icicle off his toque. It was literally freezing. We couldn't wait to get back in the house. But the picture below, see, Warren, this is a Saturday morning, and Warren was willing to get up at 6 a.m. in the dark, in the cold, to do this run and be at work for 10 a.m. on a Saturday. And the bottom picture is him at work. He is the manager at a local business, and this is one of his coworkers who's only known Warren for about a year and a half. So his name is Harry, and Harry is 60 years old. And Harry is part of what we would call the cynical majority. He was not leading a life that he thought, people like me would lead. He was leading what he thought, a normal life that most of his friends would lead. And he would listen to Warren talking about all these adventures he and I were having, canoeing up in Algonquin Park and doing these amazing sort of 4-day interior trips, these rugged things. And then we're training for this Ironman, and he would explain what that's all about. And a couple of weeks ago, Harry came up to Warren and he said, how far do you run or ride every day? And Warren went, well, Monday to Friday, we do 90-minute runs or rides. And how far do you go on the weekends? And he says, well, on the weekends, we either do a 2-hour run or ride on Saturday and Sunday, or a 3-hour, depending on, the stage of our training. It'll get further as we get closer to the Ironman. And Harry went, and how old's your dad again? 55? Come on, I'm 60. So Harry decided that he was going to start walking 90 minutes every day of the week before work, and he was going to start walking 2 hours Saturday and Sunday. And I sat back with the biggest smile on my face because, my friends, that is called organizational change. That is called trusting the people who you know and like and creating demand for a better way of living. It took me 12 years with these young boys because they had to go through certain phases of their life to understand and get the perspective that I have. And as they go through their life, their perspective will continue to change, but in a really good way. Harry might have thought, hey, I'm on the other side of the mountain going down now. What could I possibly do? And I can tell you this, the human body is an amazing thing, and it will respond to everything positive that you do to it. So, in my mind, this was just the perfect microcosm of what scaling human resilience is supposed to look like. It's supposed to be taking care of the person to the left and the right of you, and that eventually will rub off on everybody else around you. And that's how you scale human resilience and organizational change, right? It's not about crossing finish lines. You don't have to be an Ironman to learn from one. But boy, when you open your mind up to have a growth mindset and change your perspective, it can be an awesome ride. So with that, I want to thank you all for your time today. If you want to learn more about me, follow me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn. That is where you can find me. I also offer corporate workshops where I come in and I customize these, all the training plans that I talked about today. I customize that resilience project plan for cohorts of 10 people, and we get the process rolling within organizations. And it is just a really super powerful program. So with that, I wish you all an awesome day today, and I hope that you can take away something positive from this keynote. And if you have any questions, I look forward to connecting with you in the near future. Have an awesome day.